welcome and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Before we begin, I'd like to pay my respects to our First Nations Australians and acknowledge that we're all on unceded land. I'm Zooming from Darug country. The University of Sydney is on Gadigal country. You might like to put your acknowledgement in the chat. I'd also like to acknowledge that First Nations Australians are our original storytellers, and that they put the arts and creativity and storying at the centre of their doing, knowing, being and becoming. And we have so much to learn from them. It's great that you're joining us this afternoon for our Research Higher Degree Seminar. If you haven't yet joined the Create Centre, please think about doing that as well. It's my great privilege and pleasure this afternoon to welcome and thank Katrina Kemp, who is very generously sharing this afternoon. I want to congratulate Katrina for recently graduating with her PhD. She's going to talk on pedagogy, creativity and writing. And I just wanted to give you a very brief snapshot. I know you've probably read Katrina's bio, but she's a teacher, primary teacher. She's a writer, a researcher and an artist in the great sense of the word, I think, in terms of, in my experience of knowing and working with Katrina, she's always thinking very much about artfulness in her pedagogy and in the pedagogy of others. So we're all looking forward to your presentation this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for that very generous introduction. Thank you, everybody who's either here this afternoon, listening live or tuning in later and catching up with the recorded session. It is a great opportunity to share through Create with like-minded people. And I much appreciate Robin's input, who's been a supervisor of mine for many years now across the whole process of Masters by Research and then 6 years of PhD work. So that's where we're up to now. And I would like to move on to share screen so that I can show you some details of what that 6 years entailed. Just beginning with my acknowledgements from Camaragal country, acknowledging the traditional owners of this area. A beautiful place to live and work and enjoy all that it has to offer. And I pay respects to elders past, present, emerging and any Aboriginal people joining us this afternoon or watching the recording later. So we will go straight into, so our topic this afternoon is on pedagogy, creativity and writing and how those things come together. And you may have seen from the advertisement this brilliant little bit of student writing. What if an ant wanted to die to see if heaven was real? So as I describe my research and the case studies that I undertook, the context for that little writing excerpt will become apparent and its significance to the research as well. I've just popped my link there because it's so exciting to have a completed thesis in the repository. As a sort of thinking point to put in the back of our minds as we go through the topic this afternoon is, why do all teachers need a pirate hat? So just keep that in mind as we go through while I describe the research. So just to give you an overview, the research topic arose quite some time ago when what was then the New South Wales English syllabus was released, and it actually asked students to demonstrate creative and imaginative thinking as an actual reportable, accessible outcome. So I'm talking about the context of young students in their early years of learning, and how the interface of learning English, and in particular learning to write, can connect with creativity and creative approaches to teaching, or creative pedagogy. So it's interesting how what appears to be such a little thing can become a point of well, obsession really, that turns into a PhD thesis. But it was a really significant development, as I see it, in our curriculum content, that it prioritised this creative and imaginative thinking of students. So what I wanted to draw together across the thesis was the intersection of creativity, teacher pedagogy, students writing in particular, the very young students who are learning to write, who are developing writing skills, which involves a lot of challenges for young children, but how that can be facilitated in a creative manner by the use of certain pedagogical approaches. So there were initially 3 research questions, which eventually, as you work through the whole process, became a bit unwieldy. So, you know, I was interested in teacher beliefs about creativity, and did a bit of a survey of some people, but that eventually became more in the background of what I was focusing on, and came to this point of a focus question of how are teachers developing creative classroom practices in the teaching of writing to children in the first 3 years of school. And in relation to that outcome in the syllabus that I was just describing, the emphasis became very much on the how, and how are teachers doing this? What do they know, and what do they bring to classroom practice to be able to engage students in writing in a creative way? Now, with 2 quite long literature reviews, I established that there was very little that focused in on this particular element of creativity in teaching. So these aspects sort of came together, creativity, teaching writing, and catered to students in New South Wales, came together at the intersection there of creativity and writing, and creativity and pedagogy. You know, what are we looking at here, and how is it happening? So that's just a way of visualising what the literature reviews covered. So how did we decide to go about looking into this subject? Well, I wanted some in-depth qualitative observations of classroom lessons to see what teachers were doing when they were teaching writing. So what were the priorities when they were teaching their young students to write? And what I did was go and see 3 lessons per participant. So there was a case study approach, and originally across 3 schools. All this happened, unfortunately, during COVID, and some of the observations and participation of certain teachers got cut short, which was very unfortunate. So one of the 3 schools didn't end up being included in the final case studies, but I think, well, I know because the thesis is now finished that we did have sufficient information from the observations that were completed, and that I'd been able to follow through with those particular teachers. So again, those very young students in their early years of literacy learning, and wanting to follow up there with the teachers to see what their reflections were on the student work that occurred during those lessons. So we collected particular students' work samples and analysed those together. And I was just interested in how the teachers reflected on their own practice and what they saw in the student work that was, what they saw as creativity in the student work, without it being specifically predefined, because the idea was that, what do teachers know about creativity? What do they think it is in terms of, teaching young students and so on. So I wanted to see what they thought about it. So I'll just say a little bit about the general theoretical framework for the thesis. I was very attracted to phenomenology and the particular, pedagogical writings of Van Manen, which, really gives a beautiful way about writing about classroom observations in what I hope Robin may agree is a sort of rich and more poetic way of interpreting what you've seen in a particular phenomena. So we hear this concept of lived experience thrown around now all the time in the media. It's become a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's being utilised in a fairly shallow way to talk about, what happened to someone. But in the true philosophical sense, it's very much about looking beyond everyday experience, taking events in everyday experience and looking behind it for the real meanings, the real surprises in what has happened, that may escape us when we don't have time to really reflect on the things that we're observing in the world. So for the purposes of this research, we're talking about the life world of, schools and classrooms, which I've just, made a little diagram here of that as the context. The phenomena that occurs in that context are the events of classroom lessons and how students respond to those classroom lessons. And then in terms of research, the observation and interpretation of what happened during those events. And so this interpretation always has to be relative to the initial context and understanding the meanings of what goes on in classrooms and how teachers bring about this amazing thing, which is student learning. And so that was my sort of background methodology and theoretical framework, which I really enjoyed reading many other phenomenological authors as well. So just as a quick overview, within the classroom, there's been a lot of prior research about, well, what encourages children's creativity, and some things that teachers do are open-ended questioning, use of serendipity, being mindful of, drawing out the connections and the options or choices that students can make. So talking about very much a less prescriptive approach to teaching. Again, opening up thought processes, so there's an opportunity for divergent ideas to emerge. So we're not looking for that one correct answer. We're looking for divergent thinking and different responses from different students. Now, of course, the big factor that often works against us is enough time to fully explore ideas and then review them after whatever work has taken place. And within that, we like to create open-ended opportunities, but there also needs to be goal within that, so that it's not too sort of aimless, or so students need to know where they're going as well, so that they know what they've done well and what they can do next time to develop their idea or whatever. For the purposes of my classroom observations and from the literature reviews, I just developed this set of features in 3 domains, these elements that were built from other people's research, but I just selected out the ones that I thought would be to the point of what I was looking for. So really important in any sort of creative activity in the classroom is these domains of interaction, student motivation, and the kind of thinking processes or cognitions that they're being engaged in by the lesson. And within each of those 3 domains, there's those 4 elements that I was hoping to observe while I was watching classroom lessons. We'll come to what I found in that regard a little bit further along, but I just want to share now something from the case studies. So I want to show you a couple of examples from the first case study, which was a Year 1 class teacher. It was the end of the year, so teachers know their students really well by that time of the year, and they're able to probably work with them in more interesting and innovative ways, because they've built this relationship with them over the years, over the whole year, excuse me. And this particular teacher was early career, working in northern Sydney. So I went along for 3 lesson observations, all of which were based on quality children's literature, and they were working very much on environmental themes that led to asking ethical questions for students to respond to in some form of persuasive writing. And the interesting thing about this teacher was, even though, the purpose of the writing in these lessons was to be persuasive, to have a point of view and a position to argue, there was none of that prescriptive, you must structure it this way with the firstly, my first point is this and my second point is this, and so on. So this is where we come to this example about our ants that I mentioned at the beginning. So after a great deal of study of a very interesting book called Hey Little Ant, whereby this child is confronted by the ant he's about to squish, and the ant stands up for himself and gives him all these reasons why he shouldn't squish him. So the entire book is a dialogue between this child and this ant. And the good thing about this book is that it doesn't give an answer at the end, which is the right thing to do. So it really elicits the children's thinking about, well, what would I do in that situation? Would I squish it, or am I entitled to squish it, or what's the right thing for me? And this is what this teacher was able to facilitate, was the students making their own decision about what they thought about this ethical question. So it still blows my mind every time I read this, because the child has started their argument. We can see there on the yes case, it's okay to squish ants. We squish them all the time. Anyone could squish an ant. But then out comes this sort of incredible bit of thinking that goes well beyond anything that's in the book or the lesson, and they've somehow assimilated this question into their own knowledge base about their concept of heaven, and the concept of dying and going to heaven. So what if an ant wanted to die to see if heaven was real? And I just think that's so incredibly perceptive and philosophical. And when you think, this little person is sort of 6 or 7 years old, that to me is a really amazing thing to have written. And in contrast, we have the no case. So this child very vehemently did not want the boy to squish the ants. And as you can see from this teacher comment down here, they've used some rhetoric and comparison to elicit empathy from the reader. So they say, can you imagine your mum or dad or mum dead? Your dad and mum are about as good as ants. Ants' nestmates need them. So you can see here this capacity for creative thinking, the imaginative synthesis of ideas, and the empathic sort of relationship between the idea of a family and how every creature is entitled to its life in its own community. But I must say, with both those examples, you can see that there was a lesson criteria of wanting the teacher explicitly saying to the students she wanted strong persuasive language and different sentence openings to what normally sort of, in a very structured, prescriptive way might be used in persuasive writing. So all those things are evident, as well as this, very imaginative response to the ethical question. I'll just give another example here from a different school, a different case study. Another year one teacher. So again, these students about 7 years old, same time of the year, right at the end of the year. And this teacher very much engaged her students in inhabiting characters from quality children's literature for the purposes of imaginative writing, using a lot of drama-based strategies. So back to our question about that pirate hat. So this is my comment about, this is a little excerpt from my writing about the lesson observation. And I'm just talking about how the teacher incorporated dramatic presentation elements to initiate the topic and somehow sort of blast the roof off the classroom environment imaginatively, using the teacher in role as a pirate, complete with her pirate hat and voice to brainstorm the vocabulary. You can't brainstorm pirate vocabulary without using the appropriate pirate voice. And for the purposes of this lesson, she wanted to encourage students to think creatively about being a pirate and responding to this beautiful text, The Journey Home, where where the children travel through all these different sort of storybook settings. So here's another little writing excerpt from that lesson, employing the relevant vocabulary of being a pirate. So, ahoy me hearties, today I'm going to teach you how to be a pirate. You need a cutlass, and most pirates have a wooden leg like me. Oh, have I told you how I lost my leg? I was jumping over to another pirate's ship and a shark jumped up and bit my leg off. That was the story of the day. And then down the bottom here, this is the teacher comment about this writing. I love how she's put a question in to engage the audience. I think that does demonstrate creativity. Without the pre-knowledge and the drama and the book, they would not necessarily know too much about pirates. I took a photo of their part of the pirate story and they had to embellish the story. So I was looking at thinking creatively. So they had drama sessions where they had acted out these scenarios and were looking at these photos of the pirate story as they were writing as a prompt. So those few examples from the case studies show us some key strategies that were being used, especially in-depth study of literature over several lessons. So each of these lesson observations I did were always part of a series where the book was revisited many times so that the students really knew and inhabited the whole world of the story and the characters within those particular stories. Lots of strategic drama activities, role walks and hot seats, progressive brainstorm and so on to build up those connections before students were actually engaged in the hard work of writing. So a lot of pre-writing activities that we may not typically associate with literacy lessons or writing lessons, but really building up the whole way that the students understood this place and these characters that they were going to write about. So lots of sharing of ideas before, during and after. So very much a writer's workshop process. And, you know, those high expectations that students, very young students, are cognitively capable of their own perceptions, their own observations, making their own connections. And when we, go beyond formulaic approaches to writing, that's what we see emerging, as in those examples I just show you. I loved seeing, teachers telling students things like, show your thinking, like not, hurry up and get your work done or something like that. It was, get your ideas down, show me what you're thinking, positioning the students for more autonomy and valuing their student voice. Just the authenticity of what was expected of students in these lessons was an amazing thing to see. So, the tasks had specific purposes, thinking about ethical questions and imaginative worlds and so on, but they could take an interpretive approach to what they eventually wrote, as opposed to a reproductive one. And I think that's where we can see the opportunities for real creative thinking happening. As I got towards the end of the thesis, just writing up the last chapter, about key findings from all the lesson interpretations, these were the three key things that came through strongly. So just the incredible richness that comes to the classroom from quality children's picture books. They are such a creative and imaginative resource, and when they're coupled with interesting creative strategies of the teacher, everything just comes to life, because the texts add another dimension to the whole repertoire of what's happening in the classroom, and they're almost like another teacher in the room from which we gain a host of language and aesthetic features, talking about the language of the author and the images. And it was interesting to see this, because I hadn't asked teachers, show me a lesson where you're using picture books, or, they just all happened to be using that. So they were a great catalyst, which inspired students with their ideas. Just thinking about that model of, interaction, motivation and cognition, initial interactions in the lessons were very much prerequisite to then for the students to be able to be creatively motivated and spark off those different cognitive responses that are in the elements that I showed you before. So you can see that the orientation to both process and outcomes is illustrated by all the communicative activities that motivated the ability to go and write something down about the content that had been discussed. Given the actual age group of these young students, their writing processes may be quite brief and undeveloped in some ways, but I hope you can see the incredible insight that can emerge when there's been a lot of communication, a lot of prior learning, a lot of different modes of learning that happen before the actual written task takes place. For young students, oral language development is incredibly important. So having extended verbal text during discussions, or the substantive communication that we talk about in quality teaching elements is really important, and really important that they're planned as part of the lesson. Beyond what the actual teacher does in the classroom, of course, is the role of their background professional learning, knowing, you know, how to effectively utilize these texts as creative mentors, how they relate to literacy development, both through oral language and then into writing. And this was often a matter of the teacher's background professional learning, some of which I worked with that, you know, had been into the the name's going to escape me, Robin, school drama program, which is a very intensive in-school program through which teachers learn how to, you've probably all heard of it if you're involved in Create, but teachers learn to utilise drama strategies to engage students in these texts and then their writing. And of course, you know, being able to visit a school as a researcher shows that the actual school itself, as the wider context of these lessons, is engaged with research and is open to, you know, facilitating the creative potential in the classroom, which, like I said before, some of the teachers seem to just blow the ceiling off the classroom and be able to take their students into those other worlds that through the texts that they were using.
Yeah.
So just the sort of overall findings of the lesson observations were that across those three domains that I showed you before, the most strongly evident. So this is like, this little table is like like a summary of my whole 6 years work. So primarily communication and choice here in interaction, inspiration and effort, the effort that the students, you know, once they were motivated, that they put into this work, you know, these were things that were highly evident. And of course, with these approaches that the teachers used, a lot of imagination, highly evident. Of course, this element of choice is always important if we want to bring out what individual students can bring to the lesson and their learning and their way, you know, their opportunity to show their way of thinking, I guess, comes through being offered choices in how they respond to the actual task. So just a little example here before I finish up. Another amazing piece of writing where this was from another teacher. It didn't end up a sort of full case study, but there was still so much beautiful work. And in after studying Luke's Way of Looking by Nadia Wheatley, and being given this image of the one of the scenes in the book, so responding to this visual of what was happening, the child was able to inhabit this character of this boy. And in the first person, write about, I just went to a magical museum. I felt so cheerful, I explained to the lady. So this lady in front of him who's listening. I love looking at artworks, the lady answered. Which is just incredible because, you know, that's the child's own thinking about what they would say to each other. That is not from the actual text or anything. So you can see how thoroughly the child is sort of absorbed into this scenario and thinking about what you would say to someone when you had just visited that amazing art museum. So I think I like this quote here about once a child discovers how much there is to be made from looking into pictures, reading a picture book becomes wonderfully taxing. And I like that. Is it an oxymoron, wonderfully taxing? If something's hard, is it wonderful? I don't know, but I think it's a really nice quote, because we can sort of fill children with wonder about the things that we're showing them in the classroom, but also expect them to do taxing work based on that. So I think that's a gorgeous quote. Now, I've got one more thing, I think, which is the current curriculum scenario. So whatever that, inclusion of that outcome in the English syllabus that came out in 2012, whatever that facilitated, and I hope what I showed you today is an example of what's possible when you're kind of set loose by the curriculum to really get stuck into being creative. Sadly, that has now come to an end because we have a new syllabus, and that kind of outcome is not explicitly prioritised in the way that it was. But I hope from this research I can show that, like these quotes that I've got down here, it's very much, creativity is such an important part of childhood, and that can come strongly through stories, and the life-giving in the classroom in order for children to grow. It comes from these beautiful creative interactions. Vygotsky talked about how imagination is essential to life, and how down here sharp, if we want lifelong writing habits that are authentic and convey meaning in our lives, we need to stay away from those prescriptive writing process models. But a lot of that kind of stuff is getting, is very prevalent at the moment in our schools. So creativity is something that we have to keep fighting for, I guess. And on that note, I will stop sharing and see if someone would like to ask any questions. I think that's the last one, just the references. Yep.
Wow. Well, let me just start by saying thank you for that really detailed and very exciting, I think, and celebratory in lots of ways, research, because so often teachers don't get the kind of careful study of their work and understanding of the sophistication that lots of teachers do invest in.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I've got a question to start off, perhaps, and then I'm sure others will have questions too. But were you surprised? Like often we go into research thinking that we know what we'll find, but did the creativity of the teachers and what they did in the classroom, was there an element of surprise in your findings, or did you expect that?
No, I was totally surprised.
Okay.
Very happily surprised. And like there was a lot more. There was actually 7 teachers initially.
Yes.
And there was, like I said, there was 3 schools. And everyone was doing some really unique things, but like I say, it's predicated on the right sort of professional learning and the kind of values that are going to facilitate creative learning. But when you get the chance to really analyse what happened in a lesson, when you go back and you look at it again and again, you look at the work samples again and again, and look at what the teacher said about them. There's so many surprises.
Yeah,
it's so exciting, because you think, and like I say, those examples of the kids writing, I just think
they're just wow.
Yeah.
I hope that you will have lots of opportunities to share this work, to write about it, because
no pressure.
No, but I'm not trying to pressure you, but it's so important to share these findings, especially given that we're really seeing a profession in crisis at the moment in so many ways.
Yeah.
Zoe, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I was really intrigued by that point about the use of serendipity in one of your earlier slides, and I just wondered if you would like to expand on that and how you see it taking shape in a classroom.
Yeah, hi Zoe. I think I guess it connects with the idea of the teachable moment, and especially with young kids who haven't been, fully inculcated into, ways of thinking and ways of behaving. Lots of teachable moments, or just stuff happens. They say things, they do things that you didn't plan for, and so teachers can grab hold of those things and go, oh wow, that's a great idea, and build on that and bring it to the fore as a valuable resource in the classroom. That everything doesn't have to be planned and boiled down to a lesson criteria on the board, and a learning intention and a success criteria. Children can be successful in the lesson with their own way of responding to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Does that make sense, Zoe?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Anything else?
I was wondering if I could just ask a question, if that's okay. Hi, Katrina, so thank you so much for that. It was brilliant. I'm so interested in this as well, because I actually finished my PhD research recently.
Well done.
Thank you. So I was based in Colombia, and I worked in a performing arts-based intervention with children and youth. And it's funny, it was actually probably easier for it to be accepted there, because there wasn't as much of an emphasis on that, what I would call formal view of education. And I actually was at a conference in Melbourne last week, and I don't know, do you know of Sharon Goldfield, but she talked about that need to uncouple education from schooling, because it just seems to be such an emphasis on that formal schooling, and it's not teachers' fault that that they can't always invest in the creativity of children and their imagination and whatever else. It's that they're so constrained in their everyday needing to get this done for a curriculum and
absolutely
get happen and whatever else. And I find it's across the board. It's in Ireland where I'm from, it's in the UK where I've worked, it's here. So I suppose, where do you see this going forward? How are we going to move away from that? Because it just seems to be the question we're all stumped on, and especially in the aftermath of COVID, and they're even taking away further funding in terms of the arts and even physical education. I feel so frustrated by it.
Yes, exactly. There's many questions there in terms of where we're headed. And, you know, you do hear, oh, with this new syllabus, we don't have time for anything like drama or anything. And, you know, it's just an awful thing that somehow the arts are always the first expendable item on the list, and that somehow if we just sort of, you know, drill down into these specific skills, you know, that the new syllabus is focused on, we're going to somehow get better results. But you know, it's really reducing the richness of experience. And even though, you know, they've written all these units that are based on picture books to go with the New South Wales syllabus, but then it's very prescriptively implemented with, you know, with these sort of step-by-step lessons that are heavily, you know, like right at the start of the year, the first thing that the year ones were doing straight out of kindy was, you know, a big explicit lesson on prepositional phrases, you know, like, and I just feel like, you know, it's everything's gone flipped over and the wrong way round, because you could see from what I was talking about before, you know, you can embed specific skills within a bigger, more creative context of enjoyable learning, you know, where there is motivation and inspiration. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it really is important to just wherever, whenever, you know, keep speaking up and you know, encourage. I think encouraging, you know, like I've done some work with pre-service teachers as well, and really encouraging them to broaden their thinking, because they're coming out in this context, you know, they're learning on prac to go and do scripted lessons and stuff from, you know, so it's a big ask, it's a big job to, you know, keep lifting the level of, you know, to higher order thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which doesn't answer your question, I know, but but it's something I'm very much grappling with at the moment, because I do work in a school, and
yeah. Well, on that note, just about
it's our hour.
It's our hour. Can I thank you again?
Very welcome.
And, you know, I do think we all have to do what we can in our own spaces and places to change what's happening. We, as you say, we have to continue to speak up and share, I think, the kind of research and help the broader community to understand the sophistication that goes with being a teacher, the complexities, but also the importance of never underestimating what children are capable of doing. I think
absolutely,
the other things that is happening too much at the moment is this dumbing down of what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So thank you for reminding us of all of those things today. And thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Anna.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, everyone. That was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.